What's happening, guys, and welcome back to Sliced, and welcome back to another episode of the history. Oh my god, I can't believe I got my own title wrong. Welcome back to the Origin of Food series. Today we're looking at one of my favorite desserts and all-time comfort foods, the apple tart tatin. This is a classic dish in France, but it's something that is like enjoyed around the world. It's so simple and beautiful. It takes like 4 ingredients to make the whole thing, 4 or 5 ingredients. And I absolutely love it. But when it comes to the origin, a lot of people probably think that the tatin part of tarte tatin means upside down or something like that. I mean, it makes sense because it's literally just sort of cooked apples in a syrup and a pastry on top, and then the whole thing is flipped. So even myself, I thought that tatin meant to flip something upside down in French. When I looked into it a bit more, it's actually the name of a hotel named after 2 sisters that ran it. And there's different stories of the origin, but basically what it was that one of the sisters was trying to make an apple tart, and either she sort of caramelized the apples too much to the point where they were burnt and she covered it with pastry and then flipped it upside down, or just generally in making it she made a mistake and ended up with this inverted apple tart. But either way, we're really grateful for the little error because it made one of the most beautiful desserts. It's so amazing. But yeah, really interesting. I just thought that tatin actually is named after someone and not a word in and of itself. So anyway, onto the actual dish. So we're going to start off with some braised burnt apples. You can use any type of cooking apple. And we're just going to go ahead and start peeling them. You want to peel them, and you don't have to leave them in water because bear in mind they're going to get browned anyway in the pan, so keeping them in water to keep them fresh is not really going to do much to it. It's okay if it stays out for a little bit. And we're just going to work our way through them, peeling every single apple. It doesn't have to be apple, you can do it with anything. I've actually got a video, I think I did it like a couple months ago, where I did it with bananas. You can also do it with pineapple, you can do it with pears, any hard fruit works well. I personally really like bananas, but that's a bit more like finicky and tricky. It's a lot more forgiving when you do it with apples because they're a lot harder and they can handle a lot more cooking and they won't break apart as easily as bananas will. But yeah, what we're going to do is finish peeling all our apples and we're going to core them. If you have an apple corer, that's fantastic. If you have an apple corer, that's fantastic, but if not, that's absolutely fine. Just do like I'm doing here, and I'm gonna make 2 cuts. Try to be very careful not to cut yourself and also not to damage the apple, as I did a few times. I just kind of broke them a bit. And once you've done that, we can move it to one side. Next up comes the caramel. Now everyone has their own way of doing a caramel. I often have a lot of people come to me and say that they burn their caramel when they're making sugar, and so this recipe that I'm going to show you is going to teach you how to make a really simple caramel. And the interesting thing is, when you're making a tarte tatin, you kind of want the caramel to go not a perfect caramel, but a little bit more. That slightly burnt flavor adds a really nice note to the whole dish. But you want to really play that mark really close, because obviously you can't just get away with anything and just say, oh, it's meant to be as it's meant to be. If you're burning it, it's going to burn badly. So just take it just a bit over that and that'll be absolutely fine. Over that sort of acceptable caramel gold level. If it's like a nice dark color, it's going to be perfect. Bear in mind it's going to be cooking in the oven as well. Anyway, with that being said, we're going to add in some butter and some raw demerara cane sugar into a pan. You can use any sugar, you can even use granulated sugar if you want. I just think that demerara sugar is really good. It's also very forgiving as well, so it won't burn as easily as something like caster sugar, for instance, or a dark brown sugar. And you're just going to mix the 2 together. And the thing about this is that you can actually stir it a little bit because it's got that butter that's stopping it from crystallizing as easily as if you were to just put the sugar straight into the pan. I'm also going to add in just a dash of cinnamon and a couple pinches of sea salt just to give it a little bit more flavor. And we're just going to cook that slowly until it's all melted together, and then we're going to start putting our apples in so that they can color a little bit. Now the thing is, you have to be mindful throughout the whole thing that the side that is facing the pan is going to be the one that is facing upwards by the end of this dish, right? So don't neglect the way the bottom of the pan looks and just think, oh yeah, I'm going to put the puff pastry on top and it's going to be fine. No, you have to think the other way around. So I'm going to put the presentation side of the apples down, so that's the non-cored side. I want it to look nice and smooth once it's flipped over. So I'm going to place that all down. We're just going to shake the pan lightly, turning the apples lightly just to give it that nice caramel. We don't want it to burn. I had the pan on a medium-low heat. And after about, I'd say like 2 to 3 minutes, we're just going to remove the apples and put them to one side. And then we have our caramel. Bear in mind, caramel is something that you need to have power over. Don't let the caramel beat you. If it gets too hot or if it looks like it's about to... Oh my God. Don't be in a position where the caramel has power over you. Make sure you're mastering the caramel, if that makes sense. Gosh, that sounds so cheesy, but it really is true. Often people just think that, oh my gosh, once it's on the heat, I can't do anything about it. If it starts to burn, just turn the heat off, take it off the heat, do something with it, but don't just leave it and try and run and grab something else and try and speed up whatever else you're doing. Make sure you're in control at all times. So I needed to go and grab the apple juice for the next part, and I just switched the heat off. It's that simple. So once I switched the heat off, I went and grabbed some apple juice, and this is gonna help us make that sauce more flavorful. Just gonna pour the apple juice straight in and just cook it down on a low heat, and you can see it start to bubble. At first it's gonna be very liquidy, but it's gonna reduce right down into a syrup, and you can sort of you can move your spoon and drag it along the pan, and it should hold like a really nice thick shape. Oh my god, I can't even speak today. It's gonna hold a really nice sort of texture, and it will coat the back of your spoon. What we're gonna do then is pass it through a sieve. It's gonna remove all those bubbles. It's gonna remove any like grainy bits of sugar that have just like crystallized together. It's gonna remove any little inconsistencies and burnt bits as well if you had any. And then we're just gonna get rid of that pan entirely. Take a new pan that's the size of the dish that you want. It can be a pan, it can be a sort of like baking dish, whatever you want, and have that ready. Pour that caramel to cover the base, and then we're gonna lay the apples in. You wanna layer it in a way that they're close to each other so that they're not moving around and stuff like that. But to be honest, if your tray is bigger than the apples, then just make a sort of imaginary circle and have the apples closer in, because you can always just pack the pastry in over the apples. It's not the end of the world. So as you can see here, my pan was slightly bigger than the amount of apples that I had, so I just made the shape a bit smaller in the actual pan. Next up, we have our puff pastry, and it is puff pastry that makes the tarte tatin what it is. So what I'm gonna do is just bring it out the fridge straight away and hold the pan over the pastry so I can see the general shape of it. And I'm just gonna use my eye to sort of cut a shape out of it. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's a rough sort of like comfort dessert. It doesn't have to be perfect. And what I'm gonna do then, once I've trimmed it, I'm gonna drape it over our fruit, and we're going to sort of tuck it in the sides, making 1, 2, 3, and 4 holes so that there's room for the air to escape. And I'm gonna brush the whole thing over with some egg yolk so that it goes nice and golden when it's in the oven. And we're gonna bake this for about 45 minutes. Yes, 45 minutes. I know it sounds like a long time. Just control that temperature, allowing the pastry to cook, but also importantly, the apples need to cook. And we've got big pieces of apples, so we need to make sure that they're cooked to the point where they're nice and soft. So about 45 minutes, I'd say about 180, 190 degrees, about gas 5, pushing gas 6 if you need to, but just keep an eye on that. You can always drop the temperature if you need to. Like I said, be in control. It's a very forgiving dessert. And after all that time, we're gonna take it out. That pastry is looking so nice and golden, and we're just going to hold a large tray on top, flipping the whole thing really confidently. If you need some help, just get another person to hold the tray. If you want to let it cool down a bit, you can let it cool down a little bit so that you're not too worried about it burning you. But if you do it confidently enough, it should be absolutely fine. And once I've flipped it, you can just remove that pan, and Lord have mercy, you have these beautiful glazed apples. So actually, as you can see, when I flipped it over, there were some gaps in where the glaze didn't really touch the apples, and that's because some of it actually stuck to the pan that I was using, which is a problem that you might run into, and it's absolutely fine. Very easy to fix. All I did was add a little bit of water to the pan and cook that down a bit more, releasing all that caramel that was stuck to the pan. And as you can see, I just poured it directly over, and it was absolutely fine at the end. So don't worry about it, you can always save something. It's so delicious. You're just gonna serve it up with some nice ice cream or some double cream, or just on its own if you want. That's absolutely fine. And that is the history and the recipe of a really beautiful dish. I hope you guys try this at home. If you make it, please send me your pictures on Instagram at sliced_YT, also on Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, and everything else. And I'll see you next time. Bye.